everyone, welcome to the Rock Health Summit virtual series. Today's session is called Riding the Talent Rollercoaster. As we all know, we've been through a pretty extensive roller coaster over the last year, starting with what we were calling the Great Resignation and talent shortages, and toward more recently, a spate of layoffs. So that left a lot of us scratching our heads around thinking about planning for the different kinds of environments you might face as a leader or building resilience in your teams throughout those time periods. So today we've gathered for you a group of amazing panelists who can bring different perspectives to this question of how do you really manage throughout a difficult time period like this and also build a sustainable workforce in uncertain times. So join me in welcoming Lee Shapiro, Managing Partner of Seven Wire Ventures, Shauna Corey, Virtual Health Manager of Tulsa Innovation Labs, and Andre Blackman, Founder and CEO of Onboard Health. I'll just introduce myself briefly, and then I'll hand it over to the panelists to tell us more about their background and the kind of work that they do in this space. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Sari Kaganoff. I'm the General Manager of Consulting here at Rock Health. I've been at Rock Health for about 2 years now, leading our consulting practice, working with clients on digital health strategy. Over to you, Lee. Can you tell us more about the work that you do?
Seven Wire Ventures is focused on supporting the dreams of founders who are helping all of us as consumers address the challenges that we face in achieving the state of health that we all want and desire. And we've been doing this for quite a while. My co-founder and longtime business partner, Glenn Tillman, and I have been investing together for close to 30 years. And we've worked on companies that have both been focused on the delivery of care inside the four walls of health systems and provider offices. But in the last 10 years, we really focused on how do we extend care and meet people where they are, this notion of care everywhere. Along the lines, we've been fortunate to work with some great teams, build some fantastic companies. Many of you are familiar with the work we've done with companies like Livongo and Transcarent, but also NOCD, Home Thrive, Jasper Health, MedArrive. The list is pretty long, and I won't promote them all right now. We'll cover some more of them as we go through the conversation today and use some examples from those great companies. But sorry, thank you for inviting me, and it's great to be here.
Of course, and we're looking forward to asking you about the ups and downs over those 30 years. So that'll be a helpful perspective. Shauna, can you introduce yourself and the work you do in Tulsa Innovation Labs?
Certainly. My name is Shauna Corey. I lead the virtual health initiatives at Tulsa Innovation Labs. I am a biomedical engineer and a startup co-founder who found herself into economic development and building startup ecosystems. So taking the engineering background and applying on a citywide scale. At Tulsa Innovation Labs, we're trying to do technology-based economic development a little bit differently. How do we make it inclusive so that all Tulsans are able to prosper as we try to drive growth in our 5 areas of focus, one of which is virtual health. And I'm excited to share that perspective today. And thank you again for the invitation.
Thank you, Shauna. Andre, over to you.
Hey everyone, Andre Blackman here. Been a long time kind of part of the digital health and healthcare innovation ecosystem, and has just been it's an amazing ride to see all the different kinds of areas that have grown over the years. At Onboard Health, we are really focused on building a more diverse and inclusive workforce ecosystem to really power an equitable future of health. And so we're doing that through community and ecosystem building, really with a lens on things like health equity, and also representation, but also, helping organizations build their inclusive teams, and really kind of helping a lot of the companies that we're seeing proliferate and thrive right now, make sure that they have, an amazing team that is also able to bring their lived experiences and things of that nature to the leadership of the company. So really an exciting time.
Amazing, thank you. So I'm going to start us off with a pretty basic question around how can leaders or organizations build their team for the future, but also ensuring that they don't overhire, given a little bit of the whiplash we've seen in the last year or so. So Lee, maybe we'll start off with you on this one.
What great companies do is they hire with the future in mind, and they bring on great teams Hire the best people you can, because those are the people who you're going to be running with for a long period of time. But I think the question about overhiring really comes down to a question of focus. And what is the mission of the company at a given point in time? And what do you need to do in order to accomplish that? When we're going through times like these, in the last few months, where there's been talk of the R word, the recession word, um, that really drives focus and forces you to think about the types of things that you need to be doing versus the things that maybe you had hoped to be doing right now. And so the question of overhiring really comes into your mind as a leader of an organization in terms of what people do you need to focus on the things that you need to do to build the revenue of the company and to demonstrate progress, while you're going through some turbulent market conditions. And so that's the balance that you have to keep in mind as you go forward, and try not to do too many things at once. I think that will stop you from overhiring.
Andre, I'm curious if you have any perspectives on this, having worked with many different companies.
Yeah, I mean, and Lee brought up some really great points, and it's pretty much getting back to basics, right? Just making sure that that you're clear on the kind of metrics that need to be hit, in certain periods of time, and just understanding what are the things that will actually sustain the company and keep the lights on, and things of that nature too. Some of the things that you'll hear me probably talk about as well, especially with that first part of your question, sorry, around just kind of building your team for the future, is really kind of looking at the employer brand and storytelling. Like, once again, we're in health, we're helping to, build care and to improve lives here. And so, who are the people that, you want to be attracting to your company? And this is, constantly having a community or a network that understands what you're doing, understands your why, and understands where they could see themselves, at the organization. And that's what helps to kind of build this continuous kind of pipeline of individuals that know and are excited about the work that's being done. So when it's time to kind of jump in, or if there's those kind of critical roles that pop up, you already are tapping into individuals who know and are excited about the work that's being done, which hopefully helps to build hiring a lot easier.
Shauna, anything to add from your perspective?
Yeah, I think building on the importance of awareness and brand, having a lens on having that be national awareness to what it is that you're doing, that's so cool and exciting. When you layer on the growth we've seen in digital and virtual care with the rise in remote work, it really opens up a whole new, I want to say, asset class of workers across the country. And so one of the things that we're doing here in Tulsa through an organization called In Tulsa is leveraging the tech talent that we have here and working with startups, typically at the growth stage, to help them staff up using talent from our community. But you could be thinking about this as a founder, as sort of a nationwide strategy. And again, using Tulsa as an example, the tech talent and these types of jobs that are being hired are anywhere from 15 to 40% less expensive here. So that programmer that costs you north of six figures in most of the geographies, you're looking at median of about $88,000 here in Tulsa. And so it's not that there's less work to do from the startup perspective. You still need as many hands on deck as you can, but are there ways to get more headcount for less money if you're thinking about this future of work perspective as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great point. So building on that point, thinking about adaptability of talent, right? So if we're going to go with what Lee said and focus on what's important, keep the same consistent story as you mentioned, Andre, but then still need to build and grow for the future. How do we think about adapting the individuals that we have in our organization and giving them the tools to do whatever is necessary for the company to continue forward, even if it may not be the thing that they were originally hired to do?
Just kind of zooming out a little bit. I mean, I think, over the past few years, we've all been through some tough times, right? And we're also looking for places where not only our kind of immediate value, is able to be kind of, executed upon and in being useful, But what are the kind of bigger aspects that, you can invest in your people, right? I mean, the retention piece, apart from the training and things of that nature too, but like, how are we really kind of building a culture where we're constantly, allowing our people to show up, as themselves, but also, have an opportunity to say like, hey, I actually want to raise my hand on this because once again, I believe in what this company is doing. I believe in, the people that I'm building with. And this is what Lee was mentioning, during the last question, was that you're going to be, hopefully with these people for a long time. So being able to invest in your people, especially when it's time to stretch and to learn new things is always important. So, what are ways that we can really, and especially these days, how do we, really support our people's, mental and physical health? So make sure that they understand that, this is a culture where we're, wanting to take care of you and to take care of the whole person, because we know that if we invest in these kind of things, you can show up as we're building, right? And so really kind of looking at things like, mental health opportunities, then, kind of, learn how you can, tap into some other interests that you might have. So having continuous kind of learning and educational opportunities and partnerships, right, that really help to expand, what your team members might want to do to help, to sustain the company during those kind of times. So, like those are all just amazing, ways to support your people. And then also, I'm a big believer in communication, right? Making sure that people know where, the company stands as they're building solutions in the marketplace. How do the leadership feel about the direction that things are going, right? All those kind of different things help to just, I feel like, insulate around some of the rough times, but also saying, hey, here's how we want to make, full use of your interests and like your passions and things of that nature too. So I think those are some of the things that pop up in my head when you're looking at kind of culture building as well, and that all, kind of ports well into the expansion of your team members.
Andre, you make some great points, and one thing that I would say in the life cycle of businesses at the early stage, it's all hands on deck. People are doing a variety of different things. In honor of sorry, I'll say wearing many hats. And part of the reason for doing that is they're taking on roles that the company needs as they're evolving. So you might have someone who's working in product that also is doing customer service, and then someone who's doing sales but is also working on finance. Just everybody is doing the things they can do to help the company at that early stage. As companies grow, there's a need for more specialization to scale. And so that person who is working in sales and finance might be a great sales leader. And so you start to hire people that are going to report to her so that she can scale and move up with the business. And then someone else might be needed in that finance role. And communication, to Andre's point, is critical because having that ongoing dialogue to understand where the needs are rising, what are the needs at a given point in time, what kind of skills do we have, and how do we upscale someone to give them the training that they might need to do better at a role that the company really needs right now. So can we move people who were maybe helping us build a great product, but now they move into customer support to actually help clients who have questions about that product? There's an evolution there. And it makes some sense in certain cases to help shift people into those different roles. And that allows for that growth to take place where you can give people opportunities to not only continue to serve the company, but to serve themselves and take on ever more meaningful roles to extend their career, to move up in responsibility, to have more authority. Those are things that people are looking for, and companies that can grow in that manner find a path for their people to be able to do those types of things.
And when you look at the sort of macro scale, kind of across the board, I feel like as an industry, we're seeing executive talent getting squeezed pretty heavily across a lot of companies, and there's a lot of competition for folks that have experience in this space, but there's more activity and there's more companies that are active than there is existing talent. And so the need to mentor and to provide opportunities for those folks to step into those leadership roles is critical. And then also thinking about the hiring the team that's going to support them. Again, because of the rapid growth of the industry, one may also need to think creatively, because a patient care advocate looks an awful lot like your traditional customer service rep. And how can we take folks from other industries, get them comfortable working in a health environment, and again, drawing from a broader talent pool to help keep pace with the growth of the industry. Also creates some interesting opportunities to get folks that may not have worked in healthcare or may not have worked in tech before, who might be, have worked at a call center doing customer service, but could very easily work on the back end of a patient portal, helping folks navigate their virtual care experience. And those folks might not be degree holders or might not have worked in tech before, and being able to upskill sort of at all of those different levels within a company can help folks stay ahead of this sort of boom and bust as well.
That's a great point, actually, Shauna, to segue to my next question, which is around how do we attract people to the healthcare industry, but also keep them engaged during turbulent times when there may not be as many opportunities immediately available. So you talked a little bit about transference of skills, but I'm curious, are there any particular things you've thought about, especially given digital health is the intersection of healthcare and technology, of how do we get folks from outside healthcare to be interested in healthcare when we do need an upsurge of talent?
I would say that a lot of that work happens at the community level. So whenever you want to draw on a community of folks that may not have had exposure into a given industry, having either ties into that community or working with organizations that work to get those folks into tech. We have lots of examples here in Tulsa, but I'm sure these exist in other geographies too. That could be a great talent pipeline. I'll throw out one example. Doulas are disproportionately white, female, middle to upper class. When we see this growth in maternal health, how do we have a representative population providing these maternal health services while we're taking folks that were previously working in sometimes not even scientific fields, but equipping them with the training and certifications to be doulas, and now they can provide these services not only to their community, but it could be attractive for broader tech jobs in maternal health. And that's through the work of the Tulsa Birth Equity Initiative that we're doing here.
Great. Lee, any additional thoughts there?
Many of our companies are in Silicon Valley, and they're competing with Google and Facebook and Palantir and other companies who are hiring a lot of great technology talent. What's been fascinating to see is this notion of being able to do well by doing good really appeals to a number of individuals that are coming over from technology and crossing over into health, that they can make a difference. So it's not about whether or not they can create the next multi-person game or the next social network. It's about what could we be doing to improve health. For many of our companies that are focused in areas that impact a number of individuals, whether these are people who have diabetes or people who have had IBS or gastrointestinal issues or have conditions like psoriasis or eczema. There are people who have those conditions or family members who have those conditions. You're talking about half the population of the adult population in the US has hypertension. So when you're now talking about finding people who want to work and cure some of those issues by providing digital solutions to help people manage their health with the assistance that digital technologies can provide, it's somewhat easy to find people who are motivated to say, this might help me or this might help a family member. And so appealing to those interests is really important as we think about ways in which we attract people to the industry. One other thing that Shauna mentioned earlier was also the availability of resources that are coming from non-traditional areas. Not everybody has to be in the Bay Area in order to work for a Bay Area company. They can be located pretty much anywhere in the company, and we've seen this ability now to work from places that you want to live and find homes that are affordable and be in a position to have, whether it's great schools for your kids or to have the type of outdoor lifestyle that you want to have, and yet still be able to work for companies. That challenge, maybe to a point Andre made earlier, is about how do you create the culture,
Mm-hmm.
still have the mission centric orientation for people to make sure they're tied into what the company is doing so they feel that common goal that the company is working towards in
Mm-hmm.
improving health of their members.
Yeah. And and another thing, sorry, like I mean, this is literally why I started Onboard Health, right? Is to being in this space for so long and seeing kind of the innovation that was happening around things like, the social determinants, right? Food sustainability, the built environment, how mental health has kind of, exploded and things of that nature too. And seeing just kind of the opportunities, the resources that were going into this area, it was really saying, okay, we need people that understand these kind of concepts already and can actually bring a lot of their lived experiences as well as their expertise, to the companies that are building an equitable future of health. And so, especially as we're seeing, a lot of, innovation around health equity, right? Especially, as we see a lot of, our underrepresented founders in the onboard health community that are building companies based off of their own personal experiences and seeing the need already in their own lives and saying, hey, you know what, I'm actually going to stand up and do something about it, right? And so I feel like, that's a big part of, how we continue creating a narrative around the opportunities, and oftentimes, we see a lot of kind of personal experiences really kind of come out for these kind of companies that are being led. And Lee, I believe, Glenn as well around, like type 1 diabetes and things of that nature too, right? Like that's what I feel helps to, kind of push the needle on a lot of the work that we're doing. And so that's one of the things that I really enjoy seeing as well.
And just to build on that a little bit, it also can make your company more competitive if you have these people at the table who have a personal stake in this, or maybe come from a slightly different background or a slightly different geography, or maybe a different ethnicity than the bulk of your hiring pool in the city in which you live, right? So that can really harden your product when you start to go national or want to call on clients in other geographies, to already have that cultural representation as part of your team it can be a differentiator.
Yeah. Now we'll get to the really hard question. So we've talked about focus, we've talked about attracting so many people into this industry, which is wonderful. But what happens when times are tough and you do need to focus and you can change people's skill sets a little bit, but there is actually a need for some layoffs. Any advice for entrepreneurs or leaders in companies that do need to downsize their workforce and how they can do it in the most gentle, I don't know, humane way, maybe is the way to say it, while keeping the door open for future growth when the time rises again?
Some of the worst experiences that I've ever had as a leader in companies is when we've had to go through layoffs. And I think that part of this relates to a company demonstrating empathy for the people who are impacted. Um, I love the idea. We often talk about hire low, fire high. Provide a meaningful package to people on the way out. Give a little bit more severance than what maybe the rules say. Provide them with counseling services. Give them the opportunity to continue their medical benefits for a period of time. Recognizing that you're not affecting just that individual, but you're affecting that person's family and the relations that they have. And what you do as a leader with regard to how you treat people on the way out will speak volumes to the people who remain. And if they see that you're treating people fairly and with empathy, then you'll be recognized as a leader for doing the right thing under difficult circumstances and making sure that people understand why the changes were made the way they were and that it wasn't just some random aggressive act. The one maybe additional comment that I would add here is that if you do find yourself in a situation where you need to go through layoffs, be thoughtful, act quickly, rip the band-aid off, and then move on. One of the worst things for morale at a company is if everybody is thinking, what's next? When's the next wave of layoffs going to come? Who else is going to be shown the door? And I think that as a leader, you have to maybe think about making a little bit deeper cut than what you might have thought you need to make in order to make sure that you don't have to make future cuts so that the people who remain know that you're relying on them. And lastly, you have to have a session with the people who do remain to kind of hug them, put your arms around them, and make sure that if you're asking a little bit more for them from them with a smaller workforce, what's in it for them, and that may mean in times of cash shortage, strengthening their stock packages, and offering things to them to make sure that as the company turns, that they're able to see some value for having to work harder as you've now downsized the team that's there to serve the customer.
It's, it sounds really difficult, but I think that's really sound advice, and thank you. Andre or Shauna, anything else to add on this note?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's difficult, right? I mean, just flat out, and this is why it's so important to not only invest in people, but the right infrastructure, and the right kind of people leaders at your organization, right? So that you have sound advice and frameworks along the way, right? And this is why communication in an ongoing manner is critical. Once again, you're communicating the value that the organization is kind of leading in the marketplace, but also at the end of the day, like how are you actually serving your people? How are you staying visible in front of them? None of it is easy, but blindsiding and things of that nature too is also not the move either, right? And so being able to say like, hey, we're trying our best, we're trying this. This is how we feel that we can best equip you if another area is kind of being diminished in some capacity, as Lee was mentioning, and making sure that you actually articulate and show through action that you actually care about the people that are building the company alongside of you. One of the things that I've kind of seen before too is saying, okay, if layoffs are imminent and things of that nature too, especially kind of in the social landscape, there's other people who are saying like, hey, this just happened at this organization, right? Like, does anybody know? And like having some sort of contingency. And this is why community and ecosystem building is so important as well, especially if there's no kind of sideways issues that have happened at the organization, but you're literally invested in making sure that people land and are well equipped to continue their quality of life. That's why it's so important to like build community around the work that you're doing as well. So that also is something to keep in mind alongside of just continuing to kind of live your core values and reevaluating what those look like, right? It sounds a little corny, but once again, if people are saying like this is an integrity kind of focused organization that have said like these are our core values, this is where we're going to live, no matter what. I feel like that also helps in a number of
Yeah.
ways.
So, any thoughts on putting this latest market turbulence into a broader historical perspective, right? If we look back, we had such highs just not too long ago. Now there's a lot of uncertainty. Any thoughts on, how bad is it really, and how much do folks need to worry?
I'm happy to jump in. I've probably seen a few more of these recessions than Andre or Shauna has. Looking back to 2000, 2008, even at the beginning of the pandemic, um, what you found is that there have been some great companies that have emerged from these types of recessions. And so, companies that have been able to sustain their activity, maybe hunker down for a bit and then emerge, have found themselves in a position to really grow and take markets. Amazon did it in the 2000s. You can see how Uber shifted their business at the beginning of the pandemic and started growing Uber Eats, and they just had in the last few weeks a very interesting earnings report talking about some of the things that they've done in terms of shifting their business. And so I think that while the future will unfold the way it unfolds, the expectations are that interest rates are not going to be what they were in terms of some of the earlier pandemic related projections of where interest rates might go. We won't have anything like the 18% interest rates that we saw in 2000. Maybe we'll get up into 5%. That's still historically low. There's a lot of capital that's still available and can come back into the market while people are sitting on their hands right now and waiting for some of the valuations to settle out in both public and private companies. So I'm very encouraged by the fact that this will likely be a short-lived downturn, and one that will allow for us to start seeing capital come back into the market to fuel some of the growth of the great companies that are all watching this session.
Yeah, and I think maybe to pivot the question a little bit for Shauna and Andre, it does seem that the last few years has really opened up a lot of opportunities with remote work and we know folks working in different places and being able to upskill quickly. So I'm curious your take on, if we take a couple of years back, look how we're positioned differently in this recession potentially than we were in the past.
If we look at the growth in, we'll just take behavioral health counselors. In 2019, there were 79 job posts for remote counselors in June 2019. In June 2022, there's over 1,400. So that is, over the course of 3 years, over a 1,600% increase in demand for remote behavioral health counselors. And so while we're seeing a blip, I would argue, in hiring and some layoffs in digital health and virtual health companies, the overall trend has been bananas, for to use the technical term, for the last 3 years. And so there's still so much demand on the workforce side of things that there are enough companies around that what I hope is that as we train these people and get them into tech jobs, that they'll end up staying in the industry and maybe shuffling around a little bit and not going back to whatever they were doing beforehand. Overall, the demand is still growing as a whole, and so I don't see that changing unless something changes from a regulatory perspective.
Yeah, and I'll just zoom out a little bit more too. And I always think that, especially after the pandemic, people are a lot more focused on the realities of their time and their commitments and what life actually is comprised of, right? There's I lost my best friend last fall from a breakthrough case of COVID, and I think that there's a reality that has kind of been set in place when there's tightening of belts, and then there's just kind of downturns and things of that nature too. But I think from a workforce perspective, I'm hoping to see that people are saying, okay, when it's time for me to think about where I want to show up, like I'm really showing up now, right? I mean, like it's not a game out here anymore when it comes to life and quality of life and things of that nature too. So when it's time for me to go to a place where I can actually, commit, my passion, my time, my interests, my talents, and that sort of thing too, I'm fully there, right? And so that's a signal to employers and companies as well. Like there are people that are ready to make sure that the time that they're spending working is not going to be frivolous, but it's going to be spent doing something that matters. And I see like that being put into perspective, especially in this last kind of the pandemic and things of that nature too. It was a wake up call for a lot of people around like the balance around work, life, family, happiness, and intention. And I think hopefully that is going to be a perspective that we see kind of moving forward as well.
We'll need to address some of the challenges. We know that there are meaningful workflow issues at our health systems, hospitals, provider offices. Not enough nurses, not enough ancillary staff, recruiting providers, and it takes years to get people trained appropriately to do that. In speaking recently with the CEO of a health system, just adding a new PA or a new nurse before they're fully up to speed is at least 6 months, and in many cases 12, even when they're onboarded. So, how can we help make sure that we're delivering care and serving more people? Taking some of the services that might be available to be moved outside the four walls of a facility, with remote care, with care wherever people might be. Hospital at home is a growing area. Um, Now, in some of those cases, we need to find services, people to service those needs as well. But going back to Shauna's point, it may be that someone might prefer to work close to their home and to be able to be outside a facility and to set their own hours and to be able to do things with a company like that as opposed to working for the hospital and having overnight shifts and the like. And so there may be ways to balance some of these resource needs by looking at the tools that companies that are focused on digital health are able to provide to bring people back into the workforce, or to accelerate filling some of the gaps that we're seeing in our facilities-based services.
I think you're spot on, Lee. I was talking to, so in Tulsa and in Oklahoma, not only do we have nursing shortage, but we have specialist shortages, physician shortages, like you name it, we have a shortage of it from a healthcare professional standpoint. However, I was talking with a leader of a group that works with women who have criminal justice involvement and substance use disorders. They have no nursing shortage at this facility. The hospital across the street can't get a nurse at all. So, and the pay difference isn't what's doing it. It's the work, it's the type of work, and it's the environment in which folks are working that is driving, even in just, folks across the street, never mind macro scales and talking nationwide. I mean, we see it at the neighborhood level too. Folks' preference and quality of life really driving where they're choosing to work and spend a significant portion of their time in their life.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right, Sean. I mean, like, let's get into it, right? I mean, even with the pandemic, from a market perspective, we had things like digital health is, going in positive directions as far as things like telemedicine and things of that nature too. But when we're looking at it from like a health equity lens and looking at the inequalities and inequities that kind of got cracked open during the pandemic, now we're starting to look at, on top of shortages around nurses. I grew up around a ton of nurses, right? And just kind of seeing the burnout and the distrust from a lot of the systemic aspects of healthcare. I think this creates new opportunities for kind of new leadership, new perspectives, that, it's in order to, quote unquote, fix healthcare. There's actually more underneath that layer that actually needs to be fixed, as far as like trust, right? Looking at, racial inequities, right? That, disproportionately affect Black and brown populations still, right? And so, looking at it from innovation, things of that nature too, what's actually going to be coming out of these kinds of downturns or, the turbulence that we really need to pay attention to in order to build some solid foundational aspects to, when we're talking about innovation and, care for everyone, right? We have to pay attention to what's been exposed. And I think that's a tremendous opportunity right now.
And companies that offer roles for workers across the board, whether it's clinical, technical, or other support, that are able to rally around that mission and create an environment where people want to work, may have less of an issue when it comes to the next boom cycle where it's a hyper competitive hiring market. And maybe through some smart hires be able to hold on to folks if there's a bust and maybe layoffs are imminent, or maybe they end up avoiding that because they have such a passionate workforce that they're able to continue to meet their growth expectations, right? All of those are hypotheticals, but at the core of it, I really do believe that if you're able to articulate a mission that is differentiated and genuine, most importantly, that can really help attract new and untapped talent pools to your company.
Shauna, I think I don't need to summarize anything because you've just done it right here. Well, this has been a really fascinating conversation. I think I'm left at least with feeling a little bit more inspired and hopeful than I was when I started. So I'm glad about that. But it sounds like, although we've had some turbulent times, there's a lot of opportunity, both for creating good experiences for different populations, upskilling workforces, and also gearing up for the future while staying focused. So I appreciate that. Any last thoughts anyone wants to add before we end our session for today?
I'll just extend my gratitude for being invited to have such an exciting conversation with such great panelists. And sorry, thank you so much for the thought-provoking questions.
Of course.